so I'm sort of here to spoil the party and talk about what not to do. And I'm going to use an example from the United States to help sort of make it clear that we by no means have all the answers in the United States, and we're struggling with many of the same issues on restoring and protecting water bodies, and we have many, many failures in the U.S. as well as ongoing efforts that have been going on for decades to restore water bodies like the Chesapeake Bay, which I've been working on. So, I guess we're here to learn lessons from you all as well. So I'm going to start at sort of a very high level of logic and strategy. This is outlined in the presentation. How do you achieve desired water quality outcomes, and what are the necessary elements to that success? What are the things that can interfere with that success? Enemies, as I call them here, and I'll get to the example from the U.S. of what not to do. Of course, we all know, and we've been hearing for 2 days now about what a complex challenge water quality is, as well as water quantity. There are many, many sources of the problem. Generally, in any given water body, there's multiple sources of the problem, each with its own difficulties of addressing. There are many, many issues: economic, technical, political, social, and probably some I haven't thought of. And way too many people and agencies and entities involved that have to be pleased or have to accept proposals, making it extremely difficult. So don't get me wrong, what I talk about next on sort of the simplistic, idealistic strategy and planning, I fully recognize how difficult it is to actually do that kind of thing in the real world. But not doing it has severe consequences, so I think it's important always to keep our eyes on the ultimate goal and the cost of departing from that simple logic and sound planning and strategy. The last sort of preparatory thing I want to say is we all know that water and water quality management, water quantity management is riddled with uncertainty. There's uncertainty in science, there's uncertainty in the remedial measures, there's social uncertainty, there's uncertainty about the economics. But a lot of people that we have to deal with don't understand that. They think if we tell them, well, our watershed model and water quality model say, set this pollution budget, we'll solve the problem. We don't really know that for sure, but they think we do. So when that doesn't happen, we lose credibility and support for our program. So I think it's always important to make all the stakeholders involved to understand as much as possible how uncertain things are, and hence the need to do adaptive management. Try what you think will work. If it doesn't work, evaluate progress, and then change course. Do something different based on those lessons that you've learned. So the basic high-level logical necessary elements for success start with sufficient data and sufficient science. Without enough monitoring data, it's virtually impossible to do anything with any kind of reasonable certainty. I think we've heard how that's very problematic in China. It's also problematic in the United States, even in water bodies like the Chesapeake Bay, which have extensive monitoring data, not only of the water quality in the bay, but loading models, in-stream models throughout the watershed. Predicting models, we can't do anything without at least some sort of model that will allow us to test different alternatives and predict outcomes. As uncertain as those predictions may be, we still need to have a method for making the predictions. And all that will feed into good planning in developing alternatives and selecting the courses of action to follow, all based on sound logic, starting with the science and the best modeling we can do, and logic keeping in mind the final goal, and then development of effective strategies that we think will get us to those goals. The enemies of success here, and there are many, and I lack of understanding by many stakeholders of what's really involved and what's really necessary to affect change. Government officials, particularly the elected officials, and legislative bodies, members of the public, industries, companies, farmers in particular. Well, I won't single out farmers. I will for the second one. Denial is a common reaction in the United States from farmers that I'm not polluting the water body. It's those companies, or it's those wastewater treatment plants up in the city that aren't doing a good job. I'm not the one that's polluting. So there's a lot of that over special interest. By that I mean companies that could make money, say, designing wastewater treatment plants, will want to tell you that the solution is to build more wastewater treatment plants, when the problem may be non-source pollution. So you have to deal with the demands of special interest. So you have to kind of put environmental advocacy organizations in way in that special interest category, even though they're a very legitimate interest, and they're interested in public goods. So they're not meaning to demean the environmental advocates. Politics is universal, like China and everywhere else in the world. Political interference, fighting between agencies, disagreements between agencies, silos, controlling turfs, lion dragons in China. We don't call them dragons in the U.S., but they're essentially the same thing in some cases. But then simple government inaction and government unwillingness to even address problems. 40% of the water bodies in the United States aren't even sufficiently assessed to determine if they meet standards or not. 40%. Resistance to change by all the actors, or many of the actors, just inertia on doing anything is another problem. So the bad example, and this comes, I've been working on the Chesapeake Bay for the last 20 years or so. This is the watershed, Chesapeake Bay watershed. It's on the east coast of the United States, 166 square kilometers, so it's a huge watershed. This, at one time, maybe still is one of the most valuable estuaries in the world, and one of the most biologically productive estuaries in the world, with and the best oyster habitat ever on Earth. Fortunately, it's gone. I mean, and multiple states. All these states are all the way up into New York State, almost to the Canadian border. Is how far the watershed goes. So all these states have to be involved in the program. We've been working on this for 30 years now, trying to limit nitrogen loads, phosphorus loads, and sediment loads to the bay, and we're still not there. We still have a long, long way to go. We're probably not even halfway there to achieving the water quality we want in the bay, and that's after 30 years. Modeling failures, communication failures, misinformation, lack of understanding, all those issues are very prevalent, even today. I'm going to zero in on the problem, which was done by my state. I live in the state of Maryland, which is, sorry about the line on the map here, but it's that central state. Each state in the restoration program had to come up with a proposed solution for controlling nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediments. And the sources are agriculture, wastewater treatment plants, urban stormwater, septic systems, and believe it or not, atmospheric deposition contributes about 1/3 of the nitrogen load to the Chesapeake Bay that reaches the main stream of the Chesapeake Bay. And that comes from throughout the middle of the United States and up into Canada as well, almost making it an international problem. So the state of Maryland, when it does the numbers on how much nitrogen it has to produce from these different sources, says, well, we're going to have to reduce some from the septic fluid. And Maryland has 440,000 septic systems in the state, and they serve households out in the country. The septic system is a tank in the ground that serves one house, and essentially a tank that settles out solids, and then the liquid goes goes out to soil and really treatment in the soil. So it's, but they don't remove nitrogen at all. Presumably no phosphorus comes out of septic systems, but they don't remove nitrogen. So Maryland developed a septic control program where they proposed to give grants to homeowners to upgrade a conventional septic system to one that will remove nitrogen, which required putting in aerators and hooking it up to a power supply and aerating the sewage. Enormous cost, something on the order of $15,000 per septic system. Overall estimate of $2 to $4 billion for all 440,000 septic systems to reduce a tiny portion of the load that wouldn't even be significant in the final outcome. It's almost no, quote, bang for the buck. And so a lot of us who were eminently involved in working on these solutions and strategies said, that's crazy. You're never going to have $2 to $4 billion. And Maryland would say, well, we have $6 million a year to upgrade septic systems. All right, do the numbers. Okay, that means 330 to 670 years is how long it will take to upgrade all those septic systems. But I'm going to have to redo it. So, source of this policy, I don't know. This is my guess of where the policy came from. The back end of this cow. So. I hope there's nobody from the Maryland Department of the Environment in this room. I've never said this publicly in all the years, but I feel safe saying it in China. Also, other things, the things that prevent change in this program are several things. Denial by the Maryland Department of the Environment that there's a problem here. We say things to them like the cost, we're never going to have the money. Oh, by the way, why are you upgrading septic systems out of western Maryland that are 100 miles from the Chesapeake Bay? No nitrogen is ever going to get to the bay from those septic systems. Why are you upgrading them? Politics. We can't tell homeowners out there they can't have a grant. Only homeowners in the eastern part of the state can have a grant. Okay, that maybe sounds rational, but no homeowner wants to do this anyway, so nobody's going to be clamoring for these grants. And even if they wanted them, tell them no, because each one you do out there, you're wasting $15,000. It's going to accomplish nothing, absolutely nothing. So, and then the manufacturers of septic systems came up with designs that they claim, oh, we can install these things at lower cost and that work very well. Except that those vendors came out of the woodwork all over the place and lobbied the state heavily and became very influential, and part of the reason we couldn't change the policy. Vested interest, economic interest. 1 minute, okay. Glad you caught me. I was starting to ramble with pent up frustration here. So denial, politics, special interest. But the ultimate result of all that is the whole program becomes a joke because you totally lost sight of the ultimate goal of restoring the Chesapeake Bay, reducing nitrogen loading to the Chesapeake Bay, and wasted a lot of money in the process. And they won't admit it, but it is a really an abandonment of the real goal because we've totally departed from the logic and the science and sound strategy because of all those factors that interfered, the politics, the denial, the special interest. And there it is. So bad example. Thank you.